Welcome to Human Monsters. Jeffrey Epstein was born on January 20th, 1953, in New York City, to a Russian Jewish family. He was closer to his mother while his father was distant toward him, focusing mostly on his grades and other factors he emphasized as being his ticket to achieving the American dream. He had a brother named Mark, and his parents closely monitored both boys' scholastic performances. Jeffrey's love of math and science didn't exactly make him popular at school, fitting the classic model of the precocious nerd, though it would lead to his success later in life. He also loved music, though he played piano instead of cool rock and roll instruments like the guitar or drums. His parents were supportive of his musical interests, even going as far as sending him to a musical camp. He seldom disappointed his teachers, as he was bookish and artistic, though like most students, he was bored. He was remembered by classmates as aloof. It was the kind of thing that a guidance counselor would diagnose as a desire to be challenged. Indeed, he skipped third grade. In junior high, he skipped to the ninth grade. Jeffrey grew up in a working-class section of town, and this caused him a great deal of humiliation. As one business associate put it, he grew up as a nobody, and he couldn't take that. As time would tell, Epstein would cultivate many relationships with the rich and famous in the years to come. He was remembered as someone no one wanted to like, exemplified by his arrogance. As one classmate put it, he had his hands at his sides, and he said, "I'm going to be rich when I grow up." He didn't say, "When I grow up, I'm going to be rich." He said, "I'm going to be rich when I grow up." He had a crush on a peer who was known for her beauty and had even competed in beauty contests. An attraction to beautiful teenage girls. The seminal catalyst for a pathology that would make headlines years later. Despite struggling with gym class, Jeffrey Epstein graduated high school at the age of 16. With most other courses, he barely broke a sweat. Epstein attended Cooper University, but dropped out. He later attended classes at New York University, but dropped out from that institution. It was 1974, and he decided to achieve on his own terms. That year, the Dalton School hired Epstein to teach calculus and physics. Though the school would not normally hire someone to teach when they had not completed a degree, there was something about Jeffrey Epstein that convinced them that he was competent enough to fill the position, and at the age of 21 no less. He didn't look like a typical Dalton professor. Some were aghast at his proclivity for contemporary fashions, like polyester shirts, unbuttoned halfway down his chest, with gold sex chains dangling down from his neck. He wore fur coats. Most of the students were offspring of Manhattan's elite, and their wardrobe was typical of that conservative standard. Being from Brooklyn, he spoke in a working-class dialect, which also left the student body somewhat ill at ease. As for his performance as an instructor, he got mixed reviews from students, with some considering him to be mediocre while others giving him high praise. They mostly just remember him as a possible candidate for entry to Studio 54. As one alumnus put it, when I think of him, I think of him walking down the hall with this big floor-length fur coat. You know? Hair very large, kind of like John Travolta, with an open shirt and a lot of chains, which was not the norm for a teacher at Dalton during that time. Another student said, I was just sort of like bamboozled as a kid, just looking at this guy saying, why is he wearing that? Maybe in your private life, but not at your workplace. It wasn't just his clothing that came across as inappropriate. He would attend parties hosted or attended by attractive girls. As one student recalled, it was not normal for teachers to come to student weekend parties. People would have parties. Their parents would go away for the weekend. There's a party at so-and-so's house. You would be there with somewhere between 3 and 6 high school students. Everybody would be like, wow, that's weird that Epstein's here. Others had the same kind of perspective on these parties, which were largely attended by college students, many of whom partook of alcohol and marijuana. As one noted, people took notice of it. It was a topic of discussion, like, what the fuck was up with that? I don't think he was partaking in anything. The very fact he was there was disconcerting. I was not a heavy drug or alcohol user, so I had my faculties about me, and I remember thinking, oh, that is weird. Some of Epstein's former students recalled that the teacher's pets in his classroom were short and attractive females. As one student put it, he had this grin. It was kind of a leer. What I felt was, keep moving, slime ball. I probably gave him a look to that effect because the leer left his face instantly. I now realize that, given his reputation for solicitation of minors, he was testing the water with me. Another female student gave her account, one who he approached, and she shut him down. She said that in class, he would be very physically close. When you're helping with the homework and those assignments, kind of touching and stuff like that, not directly groping per se, but that she could see that he was being inappropriately near when they were working. When questioned by lawyers about his alleged sexualized conduct with female students, he was evasive or declined to answer altogether. Following the 1975 to 1976 school year, Epstein was dismissed from his position. The official explanation was that his performance was considered to be executed at a poor standard and did not represent the institution according to its stated expectations. While he rubbed some young women the wrong way, sometimes literally, he made a very favorable impression on a young woman named Lynn Greenberg. During a parent-teacher conference, he met her father, Alan Ace Greenberg, who was the CEO of the Bear Stearns Investment Bank. Epstein reportedly dazzled Ace. He also admitted that he didn't want to work in education anymore. Ace, who was a rags-to-riches type who started out in the mailroom, was not only impressed by Epstein's personality, but convinced he was tailor-made to work in his field, despite his lack of education and training in the profession. He hired Epstein on the spot. Epstein and Greenberg developed a father and son type relationship. Greenberg was taken with Epstein's exceptional intellect and ambition, which he saw as vital ingredients in the recipe for success, especially in the financial sector. Ace introduced Epstein to nearly everybody he knew. He even had him over to his house for dinner on occasion. As Lynn recalled, he had a great personality. He was everything my father liked: poor, smart, and with a deep desire to become rich. Everyone thought that he was brilliant. Epstein would go on to credit Greenberg for his success in the world of investment banking. Before long, Epstein achieved considerable success in the stock market. He applied many principles from his knowledge of mathematics, and the experiments paid off in spades. He handled the accounts of many elite clients. Epstein had maintained contact with his high school crush, the beauty pageant contestant, and they even dated intermittently, but she eventually became disenchanted with him. As a mutual friend put it, Kathy had told me she had been dating Jeff, but she said she didn't like who he had become. She said he was very arrogant and difficult to deal with, and she just couldn't handle it. He had started making Wall Street money, and she felt this had turned him into someone different. Indeed, he had evolved into a real-life Gordon Gekko, the Michael Douglas character in the movie Wall Street. When their friend took Kathy out to a movie, they were shocked when they walked out of the theater and saw Epstein getting out of a chauffeured town car. It appeared he had been stalking her, for it was unlikely that he would have just bumped into her by chance. Epstein approached Kathy, and an argument ensued, which became heated. At one point, their friend interjected and said, "I hope you're paying your limo driver a lot of money, because when I start beating your ass, he's going to have to pull me off you." Epstein backed off, but shouted to Kathy, "I'm not finished with you." With that, he got into the town car and sped away. It didn't represent the last of his contact with Kathy. In fact, they would continue their friendship for the next 30 years. He would resign from Bear Stearns in 1981 when he was found to have engaged in insider trading. His license to trade was terminated. He took $100,000 that had been allotted to him before he was fired and headed home. That same year, he launched a corporation called Intercontinental Assets Group. Their stated mission was to provide financial consulting services. He initially ran the company out of his apartment. He didn't even have a secretary. He intended to advise his clients on investments, trusts, estates, asset allocations, and the management of family fortunes. The problem was he had no clients to speak of. He decided that during the interim, he would focus on the recovery of stolen money from fraudulent brokers and lawyers. This proved to be far more lucrative. He even provided this service for the government. He was like a financial bounty hunter. It was 1984 when Epstein's proclivities for underage girls manifested for the first time. He was on vacation in South Carolina, where a girl identified as Jane Doe in court documents made money in summer babysitting for tourists. She was 13 years old, and Epstein decided to hire her. This was unexpected since he not only had no children, but he hated them. Or at least he hated children whose ages were in single digits. He plied the girl with alcohol and drugs and raped her. He would continue raping her for the next few years. He even took photographs of her while she was nude. She was unconscious in those photos. When she discovered he had taken the photos, she demanded he turn them over to her. He became violent and refused to do so. He would later fly her over state lines to offer her up to his male acquaintances as fresh meat. They were not identified, but their actions were. They all raped and physically abused Jane Doe. One of them slapped her on the face after he forced her to perform oral sex on him. He went on to penetrate her vaginally and anally. This wasn't the only shady business in which Jeffrey Epstein was embroiled. He was employed by arms dealers to handle their profits so that they would remain undetectable by governments and legal authorities. He began making more money than ever in his life. He was seduced by the glamour and greed he observed in the lives his clients were living, and he dreamed of ascending to the apex of those same mountains of cash in his own right. In 1990, after having made millions working for an investment firm that became a Ponzi scheme, Epstein bought a house in Palm Beach, Florida. One of his neighbors was Donald Trump. Another figure that would factor prominently in Jeffrey Epstein's life was Ghislaine Maxwell. Born on December 25, 1961 in France. Her father was an exceedingly wealthy war hero. Not only did she grow up surrounded by wealth, but her father had grand expectations for his children. He wanted them to be accomplished and learned. He would quiz them about such topics as history and geopolitics at the dinner table, and if they were wrong or lacking for an answer, he would fly into a rage. Though he didn't bring his children along with him for most of his trips on his yacht and private jet, Ghislaine, who was his favorite, would get to tag along on occasion. After all, the yacht was called Lady Ghislaine. She has been compared to her father. In an interview with Hello magazine, she said, "I have some physical resemblance, my eyebrows, his dark hair, his strong features. I thought I have my mummy's nose. Character-wise, my father was ambitious, determined, hard-working, and goal-driven. I like to think I share some of those qualities." Ghislaine would struggle with anorexia from the age of 5 onwards. The pressure to be perfect within her father's world was hard to take. Nevertheless, she did well when introduced to and socializing with the world's elite. However, her father, controlling as he was, would not allow her to have boyfriends, at least not while she was very young. He viewed them as a threat in terms of having designs on getting access to his considerable wealth. Her father was a publishing magnate, and she moved to New York. His ultimate goal was to carve out a considerable slice of the American publishing market. At one point, her father died aboard his yacht. She received a $100,000 trust fund annually as she settled in New York City. It is unknown when Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein met. One thing they had in common was that both their fathers had passed away around that time. Otherwise, that was where the similarities ended. Despite his financial standing, Epstein conducted himself like an unpolished, working-class rube. Ghislaine was usually more inclined to socialize with men who were more educated and refined. One friend of Ghislaine said, I would ask him about the markets, and he didn't seem to know anything. He didn't have answers for simple questions like, what are your favorite stocks? What's the outlook? He didn't want to discuss it. Most people who are involved in the markets are obsessed with them. He didn't have an opinion. And it was strange that he would be talking to you and looking at some girl's ass. Then again, Ghislaine's father had a tendency toward boorishness, talking about sex at the dinner table in mixed company. Jeffrey mixed with men like her father, so it's not like she would never be able to dip her toes in the waters of high society again. A journalist said that while Epstein had no class or charisma, she said of Ghislaine, her Rolodex would blow away almost anyone else's I can think of. The same social circles said that Ghislaine Maxwell was on first-name terms with media moguls and bankers. She was the best-connected person in the city, and she was an easy friend to have. At cocktail parties, she would invariably be speaking with the most interesting people in the room. So you wanted to be where she was. We all did. She made it her mission to polish Epstein so that he would behave and present himself more like her. People who knew them well were not convinced that they engaged in physical intimacy, that it was more like a platonic friendship. To quote one associate, it was more of a partnership. They didn't touch like a couple. He'd have his arm around her shoulders, not her waist. Jeffrey Epstein became a consultant for the owner of Victoria's Secret. At one point, he also became involved in hiring the models for the catalogs. One day, a young woman named Amy Sparks showed up at his mansion to be considered. It was his mansion where this type of transaction often took place. When she was ushered inside, he was receiving a massage. When he looked up, he asked her to remove her clothes. He said, "I just want to see what you look like. It's no big deal." When he asked her how old she was, and she said she was 21, he became ornery. From there, he threw her to the floor and forced himself on her. Amy managed to escape. Of the incident, she said, "I didn't say anything to anyone at the time because I felt like it would come across like it was my fault. I felt nobody would believe me. I blamed myself for a lot of it. And I didn't know what anyone could do anyway. These people were from a different world. They were rich, untouchable, although I didn't know quite how untouchable back then." His parting words to her were, "If you tell anybody anything, I'll crush whatever career you might have." One smokescreen Epstein created to obscure the more diabolical and deviant side of his nature was that of a philanthropist. He donated millions of dollars to various causes. It was a public relations whitewash that was sure, as he saw it, to convince the outside world that he couldn't possibly be capable of such a thing as fiendish as statutory rape. Another smokescreen was the presence of Ghislaine Maxwell. One day they met a young girl who was identified as Jane Doe, and she was 13 years old, like the last Jane Doe. Epstein and Maxwell told her about all the charities to which they contributed, including the camp the girl was attending. At one point, Jane told them about the home she shared with her widowed mother in Florida. Later, in Florida, Epstein called Jane Doe on the phone and invited her and her mother to have dinner at his home. They even sent a car to pick them up. During dinner, Epstein promised to mentor the girl and pay for a scholarship fund. The financial offer was especially appealing to the girl's mother, since their finances took a hit following her husband's death. Throughout the subsequent months, a long-term grooming process took shape. At first, the outings were innocent enough, with the couple taking the girl out to movies and shopping trips. Eventually, sex began to seep into their conversations. Maxwell would say things to her like, having sex with ex-boyfriends was easy. She would say something like, they've been grandfathered in, and you could go back and fuck them whenever you wanted. During their shopping trips, Epstein and Maxwell would pressure Jane to buy children's cotton panties, presumably the kind with pink hearts on them. To keep her mother off their back, they would send Jane home with $200 or $300 bills. In those days, her mother could not afford to turn down such denominations. If ever Jane objected to anything, Epstein and Maxwell accused her of ingratitude. One day when the girl visited their home, Epstein brought her into his pool house. He grabbed her aggressively and pulled her onto his lap. He started masturbating. He told her it was what professionals did. He referred to himself as Godfather. Epstein and Maxwell had initially come across as a carefree couple with no agenda in mind. Jane Doe learned at this point that they were partners in predation. Indeed, subsequent to the incident in the pool house, Jane Doe was frequently raped, abused, and trafficked. Jeffrey Epstein became a close friend of Donald Trump's. In an interview with New York Magazine, Trump said of Epstein, "I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it. Jeffrey enjoys his social life." They would hold parties well attended by young women. Though some were aware of Epstein's predatory reputation, he was included in the meat markets anyway. He introduced Jane Doe to Trump at Mar-a-Lago. He continued to rape her for years at home and in other states. Commenting on this period of her life, she said it caused her, quote, immeasurable pain and suffering every day. A woman known by the pseudonym Katie Johnson has said that she was raped by Trump at one of Epstein's house parties in New York in 1994. A woman named Heather Braden has said that she attended some of Epstein's parties, and most of the girls looked as young as 13. It wasn't something with which she was unfamiliar, though. As she put it, all these men were out trying to lure models, get with them. It was a predatory world in a predatory market where young girls were preyed upon by these rich men. Trump, these types of men, are predators, exploiters. They are essentially traffickers. They're essentially passing girls among themselves. We were used as bargaining chips. Trump would later change his tune when it came to Jeffrey Epstein. He would say he barely knew him. He said, "The guy was always strange. Even back when I ran into him more, I never really liked him." Maria Farmer was 25 years old when she met Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell in New York City, where she moved from her native Kentucky to make it as a painter. At a gallery show for the art school she was attending, Epstein offered to be a benefactor albeit at half the price she was charging for her painting. The truth was, it had little to do with her artistic talents, and more to do with her good looks. He hired her to be an art collector and a receptionist for his townhouse. Within his home were many works of art along the nude and erotic vein. Many young girls, several of whom appeared to be under 18, were brought in and ushered upstairs by Ghislaine. Maxwell actively recruited girls for Epstein. As Farmer put it, they had a driver, and he would be driving along, and Ghislaine would say, "Get that girl." And they'd stop, and she'd run out and get the girl and talk to her. Maria Farmer told Epstein and Maxwell about her sister Annie, who was hoping to go to college. Epstein offered to fly her to New York City. He got the girl's permission from her mother to take her to Thailand, which he said was part of the mentoring process. There was a layover in New Mexico where he had her over to his mansion as a guest. He fondled her when he took her to a movie. Back at the mansion, Ghislaine ordered her to give Jeffrey a massage and instructed her on how to touch him. Ghislaine turned her over and molested her. Annie insisted on going to Thailand as promised, and they did make good on that vow. Nevertheless, they brought her out with them so she could be molested. Maria Farmer was kept by Epstein at one of his millionaire friends' houses. She was not allowed to leave the house. She was working on paintings for the movie As Good as It Gets, which kept her busy. Epstein and Maxwell had another idea to keep her busy. It began by giving Epstein a foot massage while he watched a documentary. Farmer wasn't being paid to be a masseuse, but she accepted it as part of the starving artist gig. At one point, the sexual impropriety escalated, and Epstein and Maxwell fondled the girl over her clothes. After a few minutes of that, Maria ran from the room and locked herself in her room. Distraught, she called a report into local legal authorities, but the call was dropped. Epstein's wealthy friend had local police officers on the payroll as security. The security still would not let her leave 12 hours later. She called her father, who still lived in Kentucky, and he drove up to rescue her. Security let her go to avoid a public scandal. A girl who tried out for the Victoria's Secret catalog recalled how it affected her. "I was crying the whole way to the car in the hallway, telling her I'm not going to get Victoria's Secret. It was going badly. He was touching me. I didn't know what was happening, and he was lifting my shirt and my skirt and saying these things about my body, and he didn't like the padding in the bra. I was telling her all this on her cell phone, which she recorded in because she was at home, and I was thinking it's wrong to have this person say he could get me in the Victoria's Secret catalog and end up touching me the way he did. And I thought, I should file a police report, because what if he's doing this to other girls?" She wasn't supported by the police, and I went there, but I was told to kind of leave and maybe think about filing this report. I was really discouraged by the police officers. In 1997, Ghislaine Maxwell confided to a friend that she wanted Epstein to marry her, but that she could not keep up with his sexual appetite. That was why she brought him young girls. Of those girls, she said, "They're nothing, these girls. They are trash." Virginia Roberts was an employee of Mar-a-Lago, working as part of the domestic staff while studying massage techniques. Ghislaine Maxwell noticed she was reading a textbook on massage and invited her to apply for a position as masseuse for Jeffrey Epstein. They had the girl to his mansion, where she was introduced to him as he lay face down on a surface in his sauna. She was told that if she were good, she could work as his traveling masseuse. He began interrogating her, not about topics relating to massage, but about her sexual history, things like whether she had any STDs and how many partners she had had. She did mention that she had been trafficked. To this he replied, "So, you're a bad girl in a good girl's body." Ghislaine provided guidance when it came to the massage, as Roberts put it. She had me put oil on my hands, and then she grabbed one of his feet and started to massage it, and she told me to take his other foot. Epstein turned over, revealing he had an erection. Virginia said Ghislaine took off her shirt and starts rubbing her nipples on him, and she rubbed her breasts over his torso, and she told me to get undressed. I'm thinking, this is wrong. This is not a legitimate massage. I know they don't do this at Mar-a-Lago. Ghislaine started fondling Virginia. She ordered Roberts to straddle Epstein. He said, "Put your mouth around Daddy's cock. You're such a good little girl." Roberts performed fellatio on him until he ejaculated. Ghislaine told her she had a knack for it. Once all was said and done, Maxwell paid Roberts $200 and had an employee drive her back to Mar-a-Lago. Those so-called massages became routine over the subsequent 2 years. Of that arrangement, Virginia said, "Maxwell said they were going to have me travel and were going to get an education for me. They were promising me the world." Robert's ultimate ambition was not to become a masseuse, but a veterinarian. For a time, it seemed like they were going to make it happen for her. He brought her to New York City, where she stayed in his mansion, and he continued to pay her for the so-called erotic massages. She was 16 at the time, and she said that Epstein wanted sex with her dozens of times a day. She was also servicing other men. She was instructed on how to service adults with sex toys. She recounted how Maxwell was the enforcer and that she frequently had sex with her, as did many of the other underage girls. As Roberts recalled, Maxwell was all about sex all the time. She had sex with underage girls virtually every day when I was around her, and she was very forceful. I had sex with Maxwell in the Virgin Islands, New Mexico, New York, as well as France and many other locations. I also observed Maxwell have sex with dozens of underage girls. Maxwell took pornographic photos of many of these girls. Roberts often appeared in them, not just nude, but in the process of performing sex acts. Eventually, Roberts was offered an opportunity to double her salary by obtaining girls for Epstein. When she asked how she might go about it, he said, "Well," he said in a build-up to another kind of lesson, "if I were you, I would use your charm to entice them and my money to bring them. I would tell them you work for a multi-billionaire who has a taste for young, beautiful girls, and with his contacts in the acting, modeling, or rich husband world, your boss could help them. All they have to do is come meet me first." He preferred white girls with perfect 10 beauty, no drug addicts, and no tattoos or piercings. Once such a girl was brought to the mansion, Maxwell would lure her in. As Roberts put it, she would say, "We'll pay you $200 an hour. It's lots of money. It's a very nice mansion. Check it out. Swim in the pool for the day." If a girl bailed, it was usually during the massage. when Epstein made it clear what his real intentions were. They made Virginia participate in role-playing games where she was made up to look like a schoolgirl. Other times, she was made to submit to S&M activity. She drew a line in the sand when a girl tried to make her drink her blood, which she was too disgusted to do. Roberts outlined other aspects of her relational dynamic with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I felt that he and Ghislaine really cared for me. We'd do family things. We'd watch Sex and the City. We'd pop popcorn, have normal dinners, drink normal drinks. But all of a sudden, it ends in a gigantic foursome with Jeffrey and Ghislaine and other girls. It was a very sick and twisted family. Speaking conclusively of her position in this circumstance, she said, "I also knew that I was a witness to a lot of illegal activity and very bad behavior by Epstein and his friends. If I left Epstein, he knew all kinds of powerful people. He could have had me killed or abducted, and I always knew he was capable of that if I did not obey him." At one point, Epstein was paying her $10,000 to spend a weekend with one of his friends, a client to her. She said, "I would do anything to keep Jeffrey happy and to keep my place as his number one girl." She counted Simpsons creator Matt Groening as among her worst clients. As she tells it, "Matt Groening was the most disgusting man I had ever had to be with because of his feet and his stench. I could have taken a grinder to his toenails, and it wouldn't have cut them. It was just disgusting. And he was laughing at me. Having to touch his feet, everyone was laughing at me. Jeffrey was laughing. Everyone was laughing at me. It was like Shrek. It looked like an ogre's foot." Epstein financed a modeling agency for a man named Jean-Luc Brunel. Many, if not most, of the models were underage, 13 to 15 to be exact. Epstein and Brunel both raped the girls, and at different locations throughout the world. The girls typically came from impoverished backgrounds and had little education. Many did not speak English. Virginia Roberts was ordered to satisfy Brunel on occasion. Epstein had many of these girls aboard his private jet, leading mechanics to refer to it as the Lolita Express. That dubious honorific would be used by the tabloids. In 2001, Ghislaine Maxwell took Virginia on a shopping trip in London. She bought her a 5,000-pound designer bag, several dresses, a pink singlet, and perfume. She was informed that she would be meeting and servicing a prince, and that she would be expected to accommodate his every desire. King Charles's brother, Prince Andrew, has been swept along with the allegations against Epstein and Maxwell. Roberts was set up in an encounter with the prince in Maxwell's townhouse. Virginia described the sex as disgusting, which at one point included him licking her toes. Epstein paid her $15,000 for the trip. She had developed a dependency on Xanax at that time. She was forbidden by Epstein to take illegal drugs like cocaine. So she used tranquilizers as a means of escape. She was taking 8 a day at one point. He would summon her to New York City, where he was entertaining Prince Andrew, and arranged for her to have sex with him, with Maxwell hovering nearby. A university student named Johanna Schulberg, who was Maxwell's assistant, was sitting on the prince's knee. Virginia said, "He recognized me, though I don't know if he remembered my name. We kissed each other on the cheek, and Ghislaine placed me on his other knee. Ghislaine told me I should take him upstairs for a massage. In the massage room, Roberts discovered a 6-foot oil painting of her in the nude, something about which she was exceedingly embarrassed. She was instructed by Epstein and Maxwell to give the prince a massage that ended with oral sex. One person cited the prince's sheltered life as a possible explanation for why he took up with Epstein and Maxwell. One pal of Fergie's told me Andrew was so innocent and naive that he didn't realize he probably was being used by the pair for his name and access to potential investors. As far as Virginia's long-term prospects as Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's plaything was concerned, the future looked grim. As Virginia put it, Jeffrey was my master. I was totally in his power. He said that it was good for me to be set up with his rich friends. He said that one day he'd marry me off to a billionaire. He said, "You'll make a good mom one day." I remember thinking I would never have a normal life again. But, as sick as it sounds, I never thought of trying to escape. The fact that no condoms were ever used in these encounters was not exactly a selling point. Epstein asked her to carry his child in exchange for her own mansion and a stipend. She refused. He dispatched her to Thailand to recruit girls to bring back to the United States for him. She went, but instead of meeting female recruits, she met a martial artist, and it was love at first sight. They married a week later, and that officially sealed the end of her life with Jeffrey Epstein. Besides, she was 18 at that point, and in his view, she might as well have been 85, since he viewed any girl older than 17 as an embodiment of gerontophilia. Maria and Annie Farmer were interviewed for Vanity Fair in an article about Epstein. Their revelations were not flattering, and both Epstein and Maxwell were in a vindictive frame of mind. They threatened to destroy their careers. They even threatened to end their lives. Epstein approached the magazine's editor and persuaded him to omit their comments. Epstein was slowly but surely becoming a public figure. The coverage was benign enough at first, but then, in March 2003, the stepmother of one of his underage victims contacted the police in Palm Beach, Florida. Another girl, who only identified as A.H., also cooperated with the Palm Beach detectives' investigation. She was quoted as saying, "I was about as deep as you can get." One summer, she wanted to attend a camping trip in Maine. A friend told her how she could earn enough money by working only 2 hours. The idea was that she could earn it by giving some old guy a massage. It paid $200 for 45 minutes. She was streetwise enough to view this arrangement with some skepticism. As she put it, "I wasn't naive enough to think that he was going to pay me $200 just for nothing." Nevertheless, she decided to investigate the opportunity to find out if it was worthwhile. The old guy in question was, of course, Jeffrey Epstein, and when they were brought to his mansion, they found that it was well staffed, not just by domestic servants, but also by underage girls who had serviced Epstein sexually. When they went upstairs to meet him, he paid her friend $400 as a finder's fee. When the massage began, Epstein was wearing only a towel, while A.H. was fully clothed. He persuaded her to remove some of her clothing. He removed his towel and touched her as she continued to massage him. He was aroused and masturbated. It ended when he climaxed. A.H. reflected on how this experience affected her. I had a problem with it, but $200 for 40 minutes? That was a lot for a 16-year-old girl making $6 an hour. Despite her reservations, she began to work for Epstein on a regular basis. In fact, she serviced him regularly throughout the subsequent 2 years. His secretary called her to arrange the appointments. She would agree to go further sexually, but only under the proviso that she receive a higher rate of pay. She had related that at times the sessions were so physically demanding she could hardly walk afterwards. As she noted, "It was disgusting what I did for money." She was steadfast in her refusal that Epstein never penetrated her with his penis. He went ahead and did it anyway. One such interaction happened at the conclusion of a massage, whereupon he threw her down on the table and raped her. In his mind, he was buying her consent. They were there with a girl named Nadia at the time. A.H. said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I just wanted Nadia to see this." A.H. was paid $1,000 for this session. Not all of their interactions involved sexual intercourse. As A.H. pointed out, sometimes he just asked me to take off my clothes and he'd have work to do. He'd be sitting at his desk or something and I'd just be naked there, watching television or reading a book. Sometimes he wanted to just watch TV or read, and he'd lay in his bed and he asked me to take my clothes off and lay with him. And that's it. Not touch him or anything. And I'd get paid $300 for taking a nap for 20 minutes. Sometimes he just invited me over for breakfast or dinner or to use the swimming pool, and I'd get paid for that too. He objectified these girls, so it's hardly surprising that he would install her in his house like an ornament when he wasn't using her as an appliance. She stopped seeing him and rejected all the privileges that came along with being his plaything. Having sex with him became a hardship she could no longer endure. As she pointed out, "I wanted to be able to walk away from this thing saying that I never did that, and I'm glad that I did." When Epstein's mansion was raided, A.H.'s high school transcript was discovered. More disturbing reading material emerged as a book entitled Slavecraft: Roadmaps for Erotic Servitude. Though Epstein usually cultivated relationships with young girls that transpired over a period of years, one Jane Doe reported that their association lasted for only 5 days. She went on a field trip to New York City in 2004. Her sister was a model and had affiliated with Epstein. She brought Jane to his mansion. She didn't meet him then, but his secretary met her. The grooming began with the gift of an iPod. She also took photos of her. Epstein reportedly also wanted to meet her sister. Jane was later contacted by the secretary, who told her he was excited by her photos and was inclined to help girls from difficult circumstances. Jane was 15 years old at the time, and it is true that she was not raised in auspicious circumstances. As one court document noted, Jane Doe, 15, had grown up poor. Her parents divorced when she was young, and her mother had moved from place to place numerous times during Jane Doe, 15's childhood. When she first met Epstein, she was living in a very small town in the Midwest. To impress her and her sister, Epstein invited them to attend a magic show in Las Vegas. This would be followed by a stay at Zorro Ranch, another of his mansions. Jane was thrilled by the possibilities of such experiences, and she convinced her mother to let her go. And so they went, and they were as dazzled as Epstein intended. They even got to meet the magician backstage. Reflecting on this experience, Jane said, "For a girl from the Midwest, all of this was like a dream come true." She met Epstein at Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. She was expressly brought to the master bedroom, where he ordered her to get down on the floor. She was uneasy about the situation, but Epstein started name-dropping, telling her that the private plane in which she had flown included, among its previous passengers, former President Bill Clinton and a model who had been on the cover of a magazine. This had a legitimizing effect, and she felt more comfortable. She was invited to use the jacuzzi. She hadn't packed a swimsuit, so she just wore her undergarments. Epstein approached her and told her to give him a hug. He criticized her underwear. Later, Epstein's assistant asked Jane about her sexual history, including statistics regarding frequency and body count. Jane was a virgin. The next day, the woman summoned Jane to the main house. She told her to remove all her clothes so she could give her a massage. Doe was uncomfortable, given that there were cameras installed in the ceiling. But the environment within the house implied that all this was normal, so she went along with it. The woman's idea of massage was to perform cunnilingus on Jane. The woman could tell Jane was not comfortable with this, and she apologized after ceasing this activity. The following day, she was called to Epstein's bedroom once again. He was clad only in a bathrobe. He ordered her to give him a massage. Having made initial contact with his body, he opened his robe to expose himself. He reportedly became frustrated when she was at a loss for what to do next. He pushed her to the floor and pushed a large vibrator against her. His intentions were to force her into orgasm, but she felt no pleasure, only humiliation, confusion, and pain. She faked an orgasm to put an end to it. He went into some rap about how beautiful the first orgasm is, but from her point of view, there was nothing beautiful about it. The next day, he gave her the gift of new underwear, the kind you would only buy from a sleaze merchant or perhaps Victoria's Secret. He made her wear them and took photos of her. He asked her about her plans for the future. She told him she wanted to study biochemistry. He wanted to know how much he should pay her. Of this, she said, "I was being asked to quantify in monetary terms what had been taken from me." He wrote a check for $5,000, made out to the university of her choosing. He invited her to another get-together, but she declined. As she put it, "It was clear from the time I spent with Epstein that something was very wrong with his lifestyle." At Palm Beach, Jeffrey Epstein had a reputation among teenage girls at one particular high school. If they wanted to make big money for minimal time and effort, they could go to his house and pleasure him as he saw fit. His neighbors noted that there was a constant stream of teenage girls coming in and out of his house at all hours. March 2005. One day, two girls got into a fight at the high school because one of the girls, known by the initials SG, was called a whore by her opponent. A teacher searched SG's purse and found $300 in crisp new $20 bills. Initially, fearing that she was selling drugs, SG eventually broke down and admitted to a guidance counselor that she was performing sex acts for money at Jeffrey Epstein's mansion. SG was 14 years old at the time. Whether it was the assistant principal of the school or her mother has been disputed, but a complaint was made to the police. S.G. described her first interaction with Epstein, which took place on February 6, 2005. After some preliminaries, Epstein came into his room wearing only a towel and instructed S.G. to remove all her clothes. She kept her bra and panties on. He ordered her to climb on top and straddle him. He rubbed his buttocks against her. He directed all her movements, apparently preferring choreographed sex. He rolled over and told her to rub his shoulders and chest. He turned on his side and began to masturbate. He produced a purple vibrator and pressed it against her underpants. He ejaculated, cleaned himself with the towel, and vacated the room. S.G. left the room and went downstairs. She was given $300 for her time. A friend of hers received a finder's fee. Epstein had 2 girls on his payroll who recruited underage girls to gratify him. When questioned by police about this event, she was shown photos of possible perpetrators. Jeffrey Epstein was among them, and she pointed him out as the guilty party. Fun fact, Jeffrey Epstein's penis was egg-shaped. The police launched an investigation, but they knew at the outset that it would not be easy. Jeffrey Epstein was filthy, stinking rich and politically connected. He had donated money to many charitable causes, including a program that benefited police training. Another complicating factor was that he could afford the best lawyers in the nation. The Palm Beach PD had their work cut out for them. And that concludes part 1 of the Jeffrey Epstein story. Stay tuned next week for part 2. Thank you for listening to Human Monsters. Bye for now.